as individuals to ride in our own desires and our own hearts and our own lusts, because it will pull us away from God, because we will get distracted by those things in our life. We have to keep ourselves humble so that God can continue to work in us, because I would rather have God working in me, leading, guiding, and directing my life, than for me to lead, guide, and direct my own life and have to have the repercussions of God's judgment. I don't think I would like that one too much, Uncle Royce.
Nope, that one would be a challenge, no doubt.
So with that, folks, we hope you enjoy the lessons. We hope you enjoy the podcast. Like, share, subscribe. Let somebody know if they need to hear the words out of the scriptures. If you leave comments, again, let us know what you think.
Two faithful brews and the good news. Join the ride with open hearts. Together we'll discover God's word and where it starts. Dive into the pages, lessons old and new. Every sip of wisdom brings light to the view.
Welcome back to Two Faithful Brews and the Good News. I'm Paul Purifoy, and I'm sitting here again with Uncle Royce, and we've been moving through season 3 with a pretty clear direction so far. We started with identity, who we are in Christ. We've moved to where we operate from. We've from the inner peace of the Spirit. We've talked about the government within the believer. We've also walked through Romans chapter 8 and saw no condemnation. We saw the law of God within the believer. And then we saw the spirit of life, the sonship, the intercession, purpose, the pressures, the victory. And we even seen the love of God that cannot be broken in Romans 8. And Romans 8 also showed us that what it looks like when a believer lives under the government of God. And now we're going to go into Daniel chapter 4. And Daniel chapter 4 shows us what happens when a king operates outside of that order. You see, Nebuchadnezzar had authority, but he forgot where authority came from. And he had a kingdom, but he forgot who allowed him to have it. And he had the power, but he forgot God, and that God is the one who rules over power. And when authority, folks, gets separated from humility, that's when it becomes dangerous. And when a man thinks everything in his hand came from his own greatness, he begins to move from stewardship into the area of pride. And that's where Daniel chapter 4 fits in this season so well, because we've been moving from identity into kingdom authority to kingdom order, and eventually the reality of the heavens and court operation is our ultimate goal. So Daniel 4 gives us all of that in a historical narrative, and it shows authority, it shows disorder, it shows heavenly decree, it shows mercy before judgment, it shows where a king can be humbled, and restoration, and it's all at the center of it. And it declares that the Most High rules even the kingdom of men. Before we get into that, into the verse 1, you kind of have to understand some history on it, Uncle Royce, and have to understand Babylon's place in the story. And Babylon was not just a political empire in Daniel. It became what we get to know as a prophetic instrument. And in Daniel chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar sees the great image that's in his dream, and Daniel tells him that he is the head of gold. And that means that Babylon stands at the first major Gentile kingdom and the prophetic image. And then after Babylon would come, we get the Medo-Persia, and then Greece, and then Rome, and then the divided kingdom pictured by the iron and the clay. So when we get to Daniel 4, we're not dealing with some small ruler in a small place at all. We're actually dealing with the head of gold. And here's the key. God used Babylon to judge Judah, but Babylon was still accountable to God. And Judah had broken covenant, but it had also embraced idolatry. It had rejected the prophets. It had profaned worship. It refused correction until judgment came, when Jeremiah warned them, and other prophets gave warning, but they still would not repent. And then the northern kingdom of Israel had already fallen earlier to Assyria, and Babylon's major judgment was against Judah, Jerusalem, the temple. Daniel and others were taken early in the Babylonian captivity, Later, Jerusalem was destroyed and the temple was burned under Nebuchadnezzar. So when Daniel is in Babylon, he's not there because Babylon's gods were stronger than Israel's gods. He's there because Israel's God was faithful in his covenant warnings. And that is something that's very important for us to notice and remember. Judah's fall did not prove God is weak. It proved that God is holy. God can discipline folks, his own people, and still remain sovereign over the nation he uses as the instrument of discipline. And that is exactly what Daniel 4 shows us. And that is Babylon punished Judah, but God humbled Babylon's king. And Nebuchadnezzar was just the tool in God's hand, but he was never above God's hand. Yeah, so this opening is very important, Uncle Royce, on those first 3 verses, because Nebuchadnezzar is speaking directly, and he's addressing all the people, the nations, the languages, because this is a royal proclamation that he's given a language. It's public, so it's nothing that's hidden or in the private journal somewhere. This is not a quiet confession that it's whispered out. This is the king of Babylon telling the nations what the high God did toward him. And that alone should catch our attention, because the ancient kings usually liked to record victories, conquests, the building projects, their wealth, military power, any kind of greatness of their own rule. But Daniel chapter 4 gives us something different, because Nebuchadnezzar is not just telling us what he conquered. Instead, he's actually telling us how he was actually humbled. And that is one of the reasons this chapter is so powerful. His failure is public, and his pride is public, his authority, and we're also getting his testimony now that's public, because he says, I thought it good to show the signs and wonders that the high God hath wrought toward me. So he's not just acknowledging that God did something in the world. He says, God did something toward me. And he makes it personal. And the king is confessing that God, the God of Daniel, dealt directly with me. And then he says his kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. And that is the central contrast of the chapter, because Babylon was great, but Babylon was only temporary. Nebuchadnezzar had the dominion, but his dominion was just a delegation. So God's kingdom will last forever, but God's dominion, it moves from generation to generation. And this matters because Daniel chapter 4 is not just about the king losing his mind. It is actually about a king discovering that his kingdom was never ultimate. So, and an interesting contrast, you had mentioned it in the last podcast about Donald Trump. Harry Stone actually has a video called the Trump stump. And it is a reference to Nebuchadnezzar. And he shows the powerful connection between Nebuchadnezzar's rule and Donald Trump. So if anybody gets a chance, go check that out and see what it is, because it's a very interesting connection. So before we go any further, I just want to turn it back to you, Uncle Royce, so you can fill in all the blanks there that I may have missed.
Well, okay. I don't know how many blanks I'm going to fill in. I may have a few dots and dittos in there somewhere. You never know. But a lot of what you said, that's very, very true, very practical, because he didn't leave anything out. When it comes to realities, relationships, everything that's in here coming into this third part of these 3 verses, and looking at it in this first part, the proclamation that he's making, Paul, is just what it actually is a testimony. It is a life that he has lived. It is a place that he has gone. He has gone through this. He's sitting in it. We're looking at least a 7-year period here. We're probably looking at 8 years, maybe a little bit more, because what we're seeing is that he had received this in times past, and he's saying, I thought it good. So he's looking back on this. It's not as something that he's going to live going forward, but he's sharing something he has already gone through. So he has been removed from a place of faith or belief to a point of reality and a point of a relationship to where he totally and completely understands beyond a doubt that what I'm about to share to you is a truth. It's there. It has been placed. I have lived it. It was something that was told to me before I lived it. I should have talked to you about this before. It should have been recorded before, but it was not, for the simple fact that I just didn't think it was important enough. But I had the dream. I had it. And it talks about the fact, as we go into these next verses and begin to look at them. And it talks about the vision of a tree. You talked about that stump a while ago, but Nebuchadnezzar, and I'm going to bring this up, and you might want to comment on this just a little bit, but Nebuchadnezzar, in the places he's in, he hasn't given up 1 ounce of his power and authority. He still has it in its completeness. He still has it in his fullness. The thing that he has given up is he's kind of got off the throne of his life. He has moved down. He still has a respect for himself, but that's kind of like Donald Trump. Let's just face it. I don't think he was a narcissist, but it's kind of like Donald Trump. He has a respect for himself. He has belief and confidence in who he is and what he is. He's finally coming to understand that as this nation and as a king, I would not be here except that a higher power has ordained this to be a part of what life is going to be and the reality of what's there. But then, even in
Well, that
that,
makes me
it's
want to
there.
ask
He
you a
said, at the
question
time.
there.
Okay, go ahead.
So, how important there, Uncle Royce, is it for people to understand that God can use a nation or a ruler or even a difficult time that we're going through without approving the pride or the wickedness inside the instrument that he's using?
Let me take a couple of seconds to let that kind of sink into my mind and try to determine the best way to answer it. And the reason being is because, Paul, today there is a lot of division in this nation and in this world today. We're sitting in a place to where we don't have a clear picture. We're kind of in a point of doing your own thing type of deal, and we're caught up in it in ways that it's hard to get into the points that's there, realize them for what they are, and look at them for what they are. But as today's citizens and those in America, we're dealing with the whole world. We're dealing with the place that if we don't know, if we don't understand, if we don't recognize truth for what it is, if we don't understand the foundation with which we're looking at, it's just like us with our Constitution today and the rules of law. People don't think about it much, but those are just words on paper, kind of like the Word of God. It's words on paper. But if what we do with those words and what we do with the promises that are in those words, that's going to show where the power and authority is at. And if you've got people, and I'm going to bring in socialism and communism and place it here, I probably just going to mention it as a point of consideration as we're making decisions. But there's so many different ways we can go today, and we live in a society where technology is instant, where we get what we want. The thing of it is, we also live in a place to where instantaneous knowledge and understanding is at our fingertips. We can reach out with the touch of a finger on the internet, AI, go to any place we want to and pull together worldwide things that we might want to know or need to know. Now, when we make those decisions and choices, are we doing it from the standpoint of a desire to know the truth, or are we doing it from the standpoint of desiring to prove a truth? And you and I talked one time about truth is truth. It doesn't matter what you do with it, truth is still going to be truth. It's the foundation of itself when you get right down to it. Truth is the foundation that sits within itself, and it cannot sit on anything else. Once you move it to anything else, it's no longer truth. But the real truth is still there, and it will not change. It's just like Donald Trump. We can't change what he does or doesn't do from the perspective we're in. But many of us seem to think, well, if we can't change it, we're going to do something to destroy it so that it doesn't have any effect. And I don't know that I've answered your question the way that I should have, but today, with you and me and in this world and where we're at in the world today in America, there are so many choices to be made and so many ways that we can make. If we don't have the knowledge, the understanding, the wisdom, and the capacity of discernment to find the truth in the midst of all that, then we are in the wrong place. If we don't believe that God is capable in these places, we're looking in the wrong place. So, with that being said, it still comes back to the individual. It still comes back, and the power and authority is going to rest in that Constitution. It's going to rest in those words. It's going to rest in the power and authority with what we do with that Constitution and rule of law. Do we destroy it? Do we respect it? What do we do with it? And I'll let you have it back.
Yeah, I think that's that's why we kind of asked the question. And how important is it for people to understand that God can use a nation or a ruler without approving the pride inside that instrument? In other words, God is going to use whatever he needs to use to bring humbleness and correction to his people.
So that's your way of
And
saying he's gonna have to break that pride.
the he used Nebuchadnezzar to take over Israel. He allowed the pride of Nebuchadnezzar to do what it needed to do to take over Israel, but yet God gave judgment to Israel through that. But now he's dealing with the pride of the one who did it, and he's dealing with that individual, that ruler of that nation. And I think this is exactly where Perry Stone tries to bring that comparison to Trump and Nebuchadnezzar, is the fact that Donald Trump lost the last election. I mean, he wasn't president, so we have to accept the fact that he lost. And that's what you call cutting down the stump. You cut down the tree. And I think he learned a lot by that happening. And I think he grew in a lot of different areas. And of course, he's now president again. So you have the comparison that comes into that. So God can use Babylon as a rod of correction and still judge Babylon for his pride. And that's exactly the things we're probably seeing in the context here and into America today and into the hearts of people. Oh my goodness. But God can allow Nebuchadnezzar to sit on a throne and still bring that king down until he learns who the real ruler is. And that's kind of where we're at as we get ready to move into the next couple of verses there.
Yeah. Well, the big thing that I'm looking at here on that, before we move off of that pride part that you were bringing up, you can start with Lucifer. You can begin with Lucifer. You can go on and you can come right on through how Lucifer became Satan, how we moved into that. We can also come into the pride aspects of Saul. We can come into the pride aspects of Nebuchadnezzar here. We can get into the pride with which, scripture said, pride cometh before a fall. Those things that we look at there. But when pride is there, something has to break it. There has to be some way of taking that pride. And if this is a nation of pride, there has to be a way of understanding that pride has to be received correctly. And you cannot have pride and respect pride for what it is if you don't have an understanding of why pride must be. I mean, you take. I mean, we're at Memorial Day today. We got veterans and all, so we're looking at a place. But you take a person that's a veteran and a patriot. If they're a hero, they're there. They're not in those positions at all because of anything. Their pride that they have is in America. Their pride is not resting in themselves, but their pride is based on a foundation of truth. If this nation is on that foundation of truth, then pride will have its place. But sometimes we got 4 years of the Biden administration in between with Trump. And the reason why, God said, I'm going to give you 4 years of what can be done, and then I'm going to give you 4 years of what it takes to destroy it. Then I'm going to give you back that can be done, and what are you going to do with it? That's kind of what we're looking at today. That's sort of where we're here. I don't go after Trump, or I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I am a constitutionalist. I am a conservative believer, and I firmly believe that I don't care what we do or what we don't do. We'd better find the 10 commandments, whether we're Christians or whether we're not. You break those 10 commandments down and look at them and tell me that they're not the greatest tool of right and wrong that we will ever find. We have a judgment that we can make based on those 10 commandments. And if we follow them, we'll take pride in God. We won't take pride in self so much. We'll find that our pride comes with what we have and the relationship we have with God. So now, with that being said, we can move forward. But I do believe that we have to come to an understanding of ourselves before we can begin to look outward. We better understand the inner man before we can reach out and take a consideration of the outer man, because that's what we're at. And that's where we're fixing to move right here, because we're fixing to see that Nebuchadnezzar was in a place like that. And I'm going to let you read the next verse or two and take a look at them. I think probably you got a thought or two on that.
So verses 4 and 5 is, I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in mine house and flourishing in my palace. I saw a dream which made me afraid, and the thoughts upon my bed and the visions of my head troubled me. So we get Nebuchadnezzar here, and he says he was at rest in his house and flourishing in his palace. And that sounds like success. It sounds like he's somebody that's in comfort. He's well established, of course, and he's surrounded by the fruits that he's been given from Babylon's greatness, right? But then God makes an interruption here. in his rest, and he brings in a dream. That's mercy. Any way we look at it, this is mercy becoming to the forefront, because before judgment comes, God gives the warning. There's a whole nother thought process and message into how that applies to us today. Were we ever given warning? And absolutely. So Nebuchadnezzar is troubled. The dream gets under the skin, and he's not able to shake that off. And God is reaching into the quiet place of a powerful man where he is, and he's disturbing him before pride destroys him completely. And this is one of the great mercies that we have of God, because he doesn't always let us stay in comfort, and he doesn't let us stay in our own comforts of pride, Uncle Royce. Sometimes the trouble in our spirit is not the enemy. Sometimes it is God trying to wake us up before we fall. And that's the interesting depth that we get here, that I see in these two verses, is God is reaching out to say, hey, you need to wake up. And I'm giving you this warning. This is your one warning. You know, I know Mom and Daddy, I always got the warning before I got the whipping, because they would tell me straight. They was pretty straightforward. They didn't hide it. They didn't hide around that. They said, if you do that again, I'm giving you a whipping. And that was my warning. And if I did it again, guess what? I reaped the consequences for my action, and they humbled me quickly. So I know you got more in that. So I'm going to let you back to that.
Okay, I want to go into, and I do have more in it, for the simple fact that the very fact that he's having this vision, the fact that he's trying to sleep and he can't, tells me that God has stirred him to the point, but he has moved into a place in him. And you remember we talked about that spirit. That spirit is in man. Even Nebuchadnezzar had that spirit working in him. But now, in many ways, it was an evil spirit, because he was on the wrong end of it. But when we look at what's there, we're seeing now that God's beginning to move into that place of where even that part of it, and the air with which the spirit can go, is working in Nebuchadnezzar now, to the point to where he recognizes, knows, and understands. And he said, I can't rest. I don't have any place that I can have a peace. I don't have any place that I can go to where I can feel comfortable that what I'm doing, saying, the life that I'm living is the one that's worthwhile. And from looking at these scriptures now, we're seeing it's done reached a place now to where I can work my day, I can do whatever I'm going to do. But when I get ready to go to bed at night and it's time to rest and go to sleep, all of a sudden all this thing comes at me, and I'm caught up in things. I don't understand what's there. And I start having these thoughts and these visions. They're coming to me that I don't have a clue what they are. I just know that they are troubling to me, and I do not understand why they're there, how they're there, where they come from, or what I'm supposed to do with them. I just know that it's there, and I'm uncomfortable. Now, fortunately, with Nebuchadnezzar, he's in a place to where when that spirit moves him, he says, I don't know, but he said, I think I know where to go. And he's already had some success with Daniel and the three Hebrew children. So he does have some positives that he's looking at. For us today, Paul, when we have things hit us in our lives, whether it's our families, whether there's other things that come into our life, things in the churches, I got things at the church that bothers me tremendously sometimes, just bugs the daylights out of me. I have things that I deal with on a day-to-day basis, even in church. I wouldn't mind just giving people a piece of my mind. And I understand, no, I can't, because I can't afford it. I got to hold on to what little bit of mind I got. So anyway, I've got to keep it. But nevertheless, it still sometimes puts me into that place. And you know as well as me, it's the same thing with you, with your kids. When things start happening, you don't understand what's there, but you care. It matters to you. This is affecting me as an individual. This is getting into my life, and I'm there. We have got a world full. America is loaded with them. I don't care if you're an atheist. I don't care if you're an agnostic, if you're a socialist, if you're a communist, if you're a liberal, if you're a progressive, if you're a conservative. It does not matter. When things start happening and coming at us that are contrary to what we're comfortable with, we are going to be caught up, and it's going to move us into a place to where it affects us in our physical bodies, in our physical hearts, and our minds, and we start looking for answers. Now, when that happens, I don't know about you, but that's kind of where I see Nebuchadnezzar at right here. It doesn't matter how much money he's got, how much power he's got, he's caught up in a place. And what's he going to do with it? What are we going to do with it?
It tells you what happens next, taking you into the next couple of verses. It says, therefore, made I a decree to bring in all the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might make known unto me the interpretations of my dream. And then came in the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, the soothsayers, and I told the dream before them, but they did not make known unto me the interpretation thereof. So there's something significant here that we should see, because this is a story of a personal deal with God. So we should be seeing a personal relationship that's happening here. And it shows that we as people or as individuals, if we're not living by the Spirit, we're living by the flesh. So we notice the first thing that happens is he does exactly what Babylon always does first. He calls for a human wisdom before he ever calls for God's revelation. And we see it because he calls in all of these people. And these were Babylon's spiritual experts. They represented the occult wisdoms, the pagan interpretations, the astrology things that are there, and the religious system that Babylon had in place. But then again, verse 7 reminds us that they did not make known unto me the interpretation. And that's the point, right? Babylon can produce mystery. It can produce the fear. It can produce rituals. It can produce religious noise, or a whole religious system, but it cannot give you true revelation unless God is involved and God permits it. So the kingdom of darkness may imitate power. The religious systems that we have in church may imitate growth, but it cannot govern what truth is there, Uncle Royce.
And I don't really know exactly how I'm going to put this, but what we're seeing take place here is that I think the king called these people in and brought them in to find out what's there and have them tell him what's there. And they began to tell him. But here's the thing that I look at, Paul, and you may want to input on this, but these are people that they're not being led by God. They're not being led by the truth of the understanding of what Daniel or the three Hebrew children had. They're being led by whatever impact and whatever their faith and their trust is in, wherever they feel comfortable. This is where they're coming at him from. But they're also coming from an understanding of where he's at and what his power and authority is. And when we make decrees and decision and what's there, he is the one that has the veto power. And how he uses that veto power will be in his hands and up to him. But the one thing we look at here, and I think it happens to us today, I think we have certain people we put our faith and trust in, and we go to them and we ask them, we look for their advice, we try to take their advice, we let that move into our lives. Same thing today. And it's on a national scale, it's on a state, county, regional. It doesn't matter whether it's down into our personal lives. Maybe it's in the church. Maybe it's on our jobs. But wherever it is, when they give us this advice and they tell us this is what we need to do, how we need to do it, it still falls down at some point to a single choice. And that is my choice. What do I do with the knowledge I just received? And from my perspective, that tells me then that I've got to take and I've got to evaluate exactly what I just received. I've got to look at it and I've got to make a determination. Is that correct? Is that what needs to be done? When I make this choice, what kind of consequences is coming? Will they be good? Will they be bad? Will they be regardless? No move one way or the other. Whatever we do, it's a part of life and a reality, but it really does not impact my life in a measurable way. And I think that's where King Nebuchadnezzar's at. I think that's right where he's sitting. And then we look and we say, what did he do with that? I got all of this. I'm looking at it. I'm listening to it. They have told me what's there, but they've told me from the perspective of what they think I need to hear. Many times that's what we get. Very few people are going to tell us the truth, Paul. We don't have many people that's going to be honest with us. They're going to tell us what they think we need to hear or what they want us to hear or what they think they can get us to accept. And that's kind of where this is at. To me, that's kind of where this is at. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, they'll tell you their truth is what they tell you. And they forget to take in the context of who they're talking with and make sure that it fits them. This is the caution that when you go up and you're having somebody pray with you and they give you a word, you better weigh that word.
But what do we weigh it against?
You have to have it. This is where you have to have an ear to hear, and you have to have your own relationship with God, because you have to have a discernment. You have to be able to discern whether that word is scriptural. How does it apply into your life correctly? Because the word should confirm what God has already told you, or the word will be revealed by the Spirit of God. One of the two is it's going to happen one way or the other, but it's going to be a confirmation. And if you don't have that confirmation that ever comes, that discernment, then you better just take what was said, put it up on a shelf somewhere and let it sit there and see if that word ever comes to pass or comes true, or you get the confirmation for it. So that's just kind of a warning to people. Don't just take everything you hear. You have to hear for yourself, because I
Is that
believe
another
the
way of
last
saying
thing,
be
one of the
careful
things that I
what you
hear in
pray for?
scripture, that's another way of saying God says, my sheep shall know my voice.
Okay, that's good. I like that. But I want that 8th verse, I want to get on into it too, and we read this, and I want you to comment about it. But it said, "But at the last, Daniel came in before me, whose name was Belteshazzar, according to the name of my God, and in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And before him I told the dream, saying," and so he now has reached out and he's repeated the dream, but now he's repeating it to the person that he probably should have carried it to start with. Sometimes we don't go to those that we really knows are going to tell us the truth. We go to those that says, "Feed me a line and make me feel good." That's what we get today. A lot of people are that way because, number one, if they don't believe in somebody, they don't want to be convinced that they're wrong. They don't want to be told they're wrong.
That's true. Yeah.
They don't want to have us ask them questions because they know that when it's there, more often than not, a person that's honest with them is probably going to ask questions because he's going to want to know where we are and what we're doing before they respond to it. He wants to know a little bit about the foundation before he tries to build on it. And I think that may be why possibly he saved this to the last before he went to him, because we've got to remember now he's done this from a perspective of, I haven't lived it yet, but I'm telling you now that I've lived it. But at the time, I'm doing it from a mindset of I ain't got there yet, but I'm on my way. So talk a little bit about that one. What do you see in that one?
So the biggest thing there that I see is this one phrase, at the last.
There you go.
And
That's what I thought.
Nebuchadnezzar, yeah, and Nebuchadnezzar already knew Daniel had interpreted the dream in chapter 2. He already knew that Daniel had an excellent spirit. The Holy Spirit's upon Daniel in all of this. And he already knew that Daniel served the God who reveals secrets. But still, Daniel was not his first call. Instead, dare I say, he saved the best for last. Daniel become the last resort. And that's how pride works. Pride will not turn to the thing that's going to work the best for it, because in order to allow the thing that works the best, it has to humble itself, and it can't do that. So pride will try everything in Babylon before it will ever bow to God of heaven. And what we get is Nebuchadnezzar calls Daniel by his Babylonian name, Belshazzar, a name that is connected to Babylon's gods. But Daniel's Hebrew name means something like God is my judge. And this is important because this chapter is about judgment. Nebuchadnezzar is about to learn that God is not only a revealer, but God is judge, and God is the king, and he is sovereign. And this is where we're gonna start really seeing things make a shift, and that takes you right into verse 9, and he calls him master of the magicians, because I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in thee, and no secret troubleth thee. Tell me the visions of my dream that I have seen, and the interpretation thereof. Now, that doesn't mean Daniel was practicing magic. It means Nebuchadnezzar had placed Daniel in the authority over the wise men of Babylon, because Daniel had a revelation. They didn't. So Daniel was in Babylon's system, but Babylon, here's the best part, Babylon was not in Daniel's spirit. And that is the word right there. You can serve in a place without ever bowing to the place. So you can serve in Babylon without ever bowing to Babylon. And Nebuchadnezzar also says, I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in thee. And he's speaking as a pagan king, because he doesn't accept God as the God. He doesn't understand the God of Israel. He just recognizes that there is a spiritual power and that is in play that's working in Daniel. but he explains it through his own language, and he sees the evidence, but he doesn't yet have the theology that's correct. So we get in these 3 verses that we just had in verses 6 through 9. Before I do that, you got anything else
Well, one of the biggest
in
thing that I
those?
would put in here is I think we're looking at a king that has all this power and authority. He's been moved into a place that's fixing to change him into a point of repentance, and he's resistant. I'm just gonna put it the way it is. He does not want to
Right.
go the
Yep.
direction he's going, but he has come to the place to where he's seen too much truth to dismiss it. There's a lot of people today that have that same problem. We all have it to a degree, but some people, they absolutely want to reject it, and to me, he's looking for a reason to reject where he's going because he's already at a place to where he recognizes that proof has been given with Daniel, and he was hesitant to go there. And he said, "But at the last." In other words, to me, that suggests, well, it's done got so bad now. This my last resort is to go here. If I can't find my answer here, then I don't know where I'm going to go. But I think we're trying to see that mindset in him. But we've got several characters that we're looking at in these 6 verses. We're looking at the king, the absolute power. We're looking at all the sorcerers, the soothsayers, those that are caught up on the satanic side of things that are there. They wouldn't know the spirit if it slapped them between the eyes. They did not know truth. They didn't understand it because they're self-centered. They're looking at things that's going to benefit me. What can I say that's going to get me 2 points with the king? We're looking at the third one, which is Daniel, and we're seeing now one that does have the presence of God that's acknowledged even by the king himself that he has it. So you've got working of the spirit. It's one spirit, but he's working a spectrum all the way through from the king to these unbelievers to Daniel and all the way back to and within the confines of the God, the holy God, the righteous God, the one where Daniel's at. And that's the one place that Nebuchadnezzar can accept. That's the one place that he looks at. Today, we see these same things working and operating in our lives, Paul, but we don't look at them nor do we receive them in the way that they should be. There's so many in this world today, and it doesn't matter. That's why a person will say, I'm an atheist. A person will say, I'm an agnostic. Some people will say, well, it just don't matter anyway because I don't believe in a God to start with. And so I'm just going to live my life the way I want to. That's kind of what we're looking at here. And in Nebuchadnezzar, you've actually got every one of these character traits wrapped up in him as one person. He's got them all. And that's what God's dealing with. God is taking every one of them, but He'll take us right where we are. He got Daniel where he's at. He's got all these people where they are. And this is something I'm going to say. You may disagree with me on this, but I'm going to say it. Even these non-believers, these soothsayers, these witchcraft people, these that are there, I firmly believe this, just like I was with Adam. That grace and mercy you were talking about earlier, it can be extended to these
Yeah.
people just like it has been to Nebuchadnezzar.
No,
Daniel's
absolutely.
already there and received.
Absolutely.
So we're looking at that. And in the world today, these people that they deny God, they're denying a truth. They're denying a relationship. They're denying what's there. But looking at what we've got here, we finally got a king that has come down to a point that's looking for answers of this dream, and he ain't found none. He's in a place right now where we get so many times today. And when we get ready to go into this 10th verse and he gets ready to tell, he's going to start telling what God already sees. God already knows it. But now he's fixing to bring it out into the open, and he's going to begin to relate it now, get it from the inside. It's coming out of my mind and my heart, and I'm fixing to speak it into existence. And I'm not the only one that's going to know. But once I say this, it's going to be out there for everybody to see it. You don't want people to see it, don't put it on the internet. Keep it off. And the only secret that's a secret is the one that ain't nobody knows but you. So that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where Nebuchadnezzar is. The difference is he's troubled to the point to where he's been moved to where he knows the life I'm living, I don't like it from the standpoint of what is happening to me, but I don't want to leave it, but I know that I can't stay where I'm at. Something has got to change. And that's kind of where he's sitting. So when I look at these 9 verses, that's kind of what I see here. That's what I see. We're in a place. You heard me use that word conundrum a lot of times. I use it a lot. But sometimes when we approach a place and we get ready to look for answers, Paul, we're sitting right smack dab in a valley of conundrums and unknowns. I'm looking for answers, and I'm looking for somebody to give it to me. Okay, I'm there. Go ahead.
Look, so just to give it the several things that I see right here in these verses. You gave most of it there, but the first is Babylon's wisdom has limits. It's
Yeah.
limited with what it can do. The king's experts could not interpret what God sent. Period. The second is Daniel carried revelation because he belonged to God. So his power was not any kind of an occult thing. It was no skills of Babylon in him. It was just the Spirit of God that gave the understanding. So that tells me we as individuals, we have limits in our own wisdom. We can't do everything that needs to be done. The second is we can't do everything with our own powers and our own skills, but we have to have an understanding through the Spirit in order to do some things in this life and make accomplishments. The third thing is here Nebuchadnezzar was still not surrendered. He respected Daniel's God, but he had not yet bowed his pride. And he still called Daniel by a Babylonian name and still filtered God through his own pagan categories. And that tells me that we as individuals, we still hold ourselves into our own throne because we still hold pride and we don't want to surrender every part of our heart to what God is calling us to. And we continue to try to view God through our own filter and our own eyes instead of through who God is and his own character, his nature and design. And then the fourth is God was coming after the king's pride. So this dream was not just the information that was given, and it was for mercy before the judgment ever came. So God warned Nebuchadnezzar before he humbled him. And as individuals, God shows us things before and things occur. They foreshadow, in other words. I remember learning that in school. I was like, ooh, foreshadowing. I like that word. They foreshadow something to us if we're being aware and paying attention that something's going to happen if this occurs. So we need to either get it corrected or we will see the repercussions for those things. And the big idea is this: when God wants to confront a proud person, he may disturb their sleep before he breaks their throne.
Very true.
Nebuchadnezzar had power, he had the wealth, armies, he had everything needed, religious experts, but one dream from God exposed how helpless he really was. And the king could command a nation, but he could not command peace in his own soul.
So we're seeing mercy being played out here with God. We're seeing God saying,
Mercy, mercy, mercy.
you have the choice, but I'm going to try to influence that choice and let you see the truth so that you will know. And he's trying to move us into a place of understanding and place of foundation that we can get on, put our faith on it, and then we can find a way to walk in that spirit. And I think that's where he's at, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, it can be a challenge to I don't even know that we need to go much further because we're fixing to break down that tree and
Right.
go into it and start looking at it. So, but he's gonna do it. I am gonna read that 10th verse, so because we already 45 minutes on this thing. But it said
Yes, sir.
in that 10th verse, it said, "Thus were the visions of my head in my bed. I saw, and behold, a tree in the middle of the earth, and the height thereof was great." And so what we're seeing, and I'm going to say this, even in visions and stuff, sometimes God allows us to see those visions within the confines of what our experiences are and what we're looking at when it's there and where he's at and where he's looking out from. He's from his perspective, he's looking at the whole earth, and what he's seeing is from the perspective of what he has power and authority over. And so when he sees this and begins to share this vision, it's to me, it kind of reaches a point when it suggests there ain't nobody in this vision but me and God. We just there.
You know,
And
it's interesting you said that. I'm trying to remember. I heard a speaker say one time, God can only use what you know.
Yeah.
So if he's going to speak to you, he's going to speak to you in a way that of things that you know. And I think Luke Holter, I think was his name. And he said a lot of times when he sees things, he grew up in the 80s. He says, so when he sees things and he has to try to make interpretations, he says, sometimes it may come through Care Bears because he grew up with Care Bears. And he grew up with Back to the Future things. He grew up with all of these little deals that you have in those time frames, and he can only use what you have in your knowledge. Otherwise, you'll never be able to interpret what's there without having some kind of representation. And it was really interesting to how he broke that down. He said, because if I have a vision or a dream, he said it may be something to do with the Care Bear, but here's what this Care Bear stood for. over here, and here's what this is for the meaning of what happened in this dream or this vision or whatever the case was. So it was interesting that you brought that to the forefront, because Nebuchadnezzar can relate to a tree. He can relate to the massiveness and the size and the height of it. So I don't know. That just kind of struck me there. Just a thought that popped in my head when you said that.
Yeah, and we don't think about it a lot of the time, but if we get it any other way and we don't have an understanding or an experience of something that's there, we can ask questions. We can do anything we want to. We can receive it any way we want to. But without an experience, anything that we do and any decisions or choices that we make is going to be based on guesswork. We're just going to have to make an assumption and believe what is there or what's not there. But when we get to that point, Paul, do we really have faith when that's where we are? Don't we have to have that foundation, something solid, in order for faith to take hold and us be willing to place our lives into that and say, okay, this is something that I've seen, I've got experience, I know this to be true, and because of it, I'm going to put my faith in that. You say what you want to about this king, but his faith is setting where he's seen and had experience. That's where he's placing
Yeah.
his faith. He's in the world. This dream is based in that area, and that's what they're looking at. So faith, people don't think about it, but faith is active. If we have faith in something, we're going to act on that faith. It may be nothing more than just standing and taking a stand and saying, I will not be moved, kind of like the 3 Hebrew children did. It may be in a place to where we stand, kind of like Daniel did. And when they told him that you got to do this 3 times a day, you got to pray, you've got to do these. Well, it says that he stood and he had a habit of praying in that window 3 times a day. That windows were open to the east. And when that decree come out, he had the choice of rejecting it or not. And when he went ahead and continued doing what he was doing, his enemies come against him. Paul, we got enemies in this world. We've got people that if they get their chance, they'll take any kind of prestige or any kind of pride or anything that we have in our lives. They'll take it. They'll use. They'll talk about us. Excuse me. They'll do anything in the world they can to move us into a place to where we doubt the very experiences that we've had. And that's what Satan's good at. It's called deception, and it's there. But with the king, where he's at and what he's doing, what he's looking at, he's got faith in what he's seen, what he's moved to, and how he's responded and what's there. And the fact that he's done it, we see his power as he's dealt with those, that power and authority with the decrees moves him into a place to where when he makes those, it's kind of like our Constitution and our rules of law. It hits and acts. But then when you look, you're usually going to find when it's things like that, we're going to find our face in a place of deliverance. Now, that deliverance may not be exactly where we want it. I know with Paul, when he got them 39 stripes on his back, or Jesus, when he went to the cross, that ain't exactly what he wanted to go through or deal with. But when he got to the other end, he was able to say, it is finished and it's over. And I think that's where Nebuchadnezzar's looking at. He's looking for a place of completion. So I'm going to let you go ahead and talk on that and do what you feel like you need to do. I don't think right now I can add much more to it.
Yeah, no, it's Nebuchadnezzar. He knows what his dream has been. He doesn't need Daniel to tell him his dream. He just wants the confirmation of everything. And he's just seeking that. He's trying to find comfort in something that's not going to be comfortable, because he can feel that there's something that's about to happen, and he doesn't know how to deal with it. And that's kind of where we're going to go when we start in on the next podcast in verse 10, and we start getting into the vision, and then we start getting into the interpretation of it. That's just too much to try to do in this episode. So I just kind of want to leave it here that we have to be careful as individuals to ride in our own desires and our own hearts and our own lusts, because it will pull us away from God, because we will get distracted by those things in our life. We have to keep ourselves humble so that God can continue to work in us, because I would rather have God working in me, leading, guiding, and directing my life, than for me to lead, guide, and direct my own life and have to have the repercussions of God's judgment. I don't think I would like that one too much, Uncle Royce.
Nope, that one would be a challenge, no doubt.
So with that, folks, we hope you enjoy the lessons. We hope you enjoy the podcast. Like, share, subscribe. Let somebody know if they need to hear the words out of the scriptures. If you leave comments, again, let us know what you think. If you like it, if you don't like it, we don't mind listening, but we also want to be sure that truth is delivered to the best of ability that we can. We also want to ask you to leave comments. Let us know something that you may want to hear so that we can take that and maybe use it to make an episode or a podcast. Because if it's something that you're looking for, something that you have a hunger to, you're more than willing to listen. We don't just want to put information out there. We want it to be able to help change your life and the Holy Spirit be able to work in you with it. So with that, we want to wish you all the best and God bless.